Hey, Drew, I found a nice little life hack. Guess what it is?
I wonder. I might have the same thing. You tell
There you
me.
go. It's these neat little magic mind elixirs. It's this little all natural drink to drink in the morning, a productivity drink, I think they call it.
Yeah. It's pretty cool stuff. It's got matcha in it, which
Yeah.
I've never been able to like afford matcha because it's a very high price
hmm
like green tea. That's I don't know. They pull it from the mountaintops or something,
Yeah,
but it's like a concentrated version of matcha, and it's like the best green tea flavor you'll ever taste. But
absolutely.
I drink this with my coffee in the mornings and work days. My mornings are uber productive. I don't know, like I'm not bouncing off the walls or anything. I just have like a little more energy, a little more clarity. It's not it makes my mind magic, I guess. You know what I mean?
See, for me, it solved a nice little problem. I have this unfortunate energy drink obsession. I drink
Uh,
one to get ready in the morning as I go, the 140 milligrams of caffeine or whatever. But then midway through my 8 hour day, I talk myself into having a second one. And that's a little too much. It becomes kind of an
yeah.
expensive day. That's a lot of caffeine, and I'm still getting the crash from it. So I'm working on weaning my way off of that second energy drink, just having a little bit of caffeine in the morning. And these magic minds help me kind of finesse that way through, keep the sustained energy through the day, and not have to do a whole nother
Yeah.
big giant energy drink the second
Yeah.
half of the day.
It's cut my my pots of coffee from 2 to 1, which is a healthy choice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm burning through these, so I'm going to be using our code to restock. And if you go to magicmind.co/comics fun profit and use our code comics fun profit, you get 56% off the subscription for the next 10 days with this code. You can use that same code comics fun profit to get 20% off, but you get 50% off if you do the subscription model in the next 10 days. So
56% off. They're really hooking you up.
yeah, more than half. More than
There you
half.
go.
I'm no math whiz, but that's pretty good. So yeah,
Absolutely.
check out Magic Mind. We like it, and we think it's helping us make some healthy choices,
Yeah,
which is what we need to do.
absolutely.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing a friend of the show, writer Stuart Moore. Stuart is here to promote his latest prose novel, Into the Dark Dimension. It's a Marvel Crisis Protocol novel from Aconite Books. It comes out on April 18th in the US and on June 22nd in the UK. Now, this is the third book in the series. He has written the first book, which was titled Target Cree. And at the end of that book, he created the Shadow Avengers. And that led to the second book called, of course, Shadow Avengers. And that was written by Carrie Harris. Stuart, welcome back to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no, and Stuart, thank you very much for coming back on. Yeah, like I said, just thank you very much for coming back onto the show. I'm going to say this is for listeners, this is pretty incredible because this is Stuart has this is the third time Stuart has been on in less than a year. Yeah.
I guess that is right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, thank you very much for coming back on. All right. So Stuart, I'm just going to go over some of the stuff that you've worked on in the past and also current works that you're doing right now. Now,
Uh-huh.
listeners, so Stuart is a book editor. He's also an award-winning comics editor, and he's a founding editor of the DC Vertical imprint. He has written the 3 volumes of the New York Times best-selling middle grade series, The Zodiac Legacy, and that was created and co-written by Stan Lee. Stuart has also done the novelization for the X-Men, the Dark Phoenix saga, and also the novelization of the Marvel Comics event Civil War. He's currently working at Ahoy Comics and has written, uh, uh, I'm just going to name a couple things that he's written for Ahoy Comics. Captain Ginger, he also written the Wrong Earth Purple one-shot, that he's worked with artist Fred Harper, and he and Fred just completed their latest series, Highball. Now that trade will be coming out on March 29th. Stuart, is there anything else you want to add, or please feel free to correct me?
That's all good. Yeah, I've done various writing for DC and Marvel and for franchises like Star Trek and the Transformers over the years too. But yeah, that's a good summary of my most recent work.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Now, before we begin, I want to give a big shout out to Ashley Stevens and Joe Riley. Now, they handled the sales, marketing, and publicity for Aconite Books. And Ashley, mahalo, thank you in Hawaiian for sending me an advanced reading copy, actually, of the first 2 chapters of Into the Dark Dimension. Stuart, I'm going to ask, do you want to add anything to that? With
No, the Aconite guys have been great, and yeah, Ashley and Joe, I guess it is, are both fairly new there, and they've really jumped in and helped a lot with this process. They've been wonderful to work with.
That's great. Okay, now Stuart, for new listeners and new readers, where can they follow you on social media?
Okay, I'm on Twitter at Stuart Moore 1 and Facebook also Stuart Moore 1. Instagram is Stuart Moore 01, just to make it confusing, I guess. I have a few other accounts, but those are the main ones. I have a website which is stuartmoorewriter.com.
Okay, all right. Now, for listeners, before I start jumping into Stuart's book Into the Dark Dimension, I just want to go over a little bit about the history of the Marvel Crisis Protocol line. Now, what I've gathered, now I'm not a tabletop game player, but my understanding is that this is based on the popular tabletop game Marvel Crisis Protocol. Now, what I have read about this game from the Atomic Mass game article is that there's miniature figures, there's cards that show each character's abilities, and I think there's also something that they also have like team tactic cards, crisis cards. I know there's also there's like dices involved and stuff like that. I'm Stuart, do you want to add anything else, or did I miss anything?
No, not really. That's a pretty good summary. It's tabletop miniatures, which is a format or a format for games that was popularized some years ago by Warhammer, and some of the same people are behind this game. The game itself is published by a big game company called Asmodee, which is a sister company to Aconite Books. So so we have a pretty tight working relationship, and I've been given enormous freedom in writing these books. The main thing they ask me to do is make sure there are a few big battles that can be played if people want to do that, if people want to go back to the game, which I would want to do anyway. But other than that, like we try to use some of the characters who are either about to be released as figures or recently released, that sort of thing. But in general, they're just to me they're just big splashy, epic stories of the Marvel universe.
Yeah. Okay. How did you team up with Aconite Books?
It went through Marvel. I've written Marvel novels for Marvel themselves when they were doing it, and also for Titan. And they recommended me for this. This was Aconite has several sort of sublines of Marvel books. Like they have Professor Xavier's First Class, I think it is, and Tales of Asgard. This one involves, because this one's tied into the game, it involves a lot of the big characters, and they wanted to use a lot of the big Marvel characters in it. And Marvel kind of recommended me as someone with not only experience writing novels in this universe, but familiarity with a lot of those characters. And so that's how it came together. They're very challenging books to write because they do have a lot of characters, and I need to make sure. I need to make sure I'm not cramming too much into a book, but also that every character gets their time, and that the plot doesn't wind up getting lost in all the little bits. So they're tricky to write, but they're very, very satisfying and fun.
Oh yes. And I probably go into that a little bit later on. Um,
Mhm.
let's see now. Um, before before let's see before we get into the dark dimension, may I ask you, can you bring listeners up to speed on the first two novels? Again, I know you wrote the
Yeah.
first novel, Target Cree. At the end of that, you created the Shadow Avengers, and then Carrie Harris wrote the second book in the series, Shadow Avengers.
Right. And yeah, and I want to stress too that all three of these books, you can pick up any one of them and read them. They are interconnected and they do add up to a larger saga. But they're designed to be fairly self-contained. Target Cree begins with a on a planet on the far outskirts of the Kree galaxy, of the Kree Empire, which is being destroyed, and the Guardians are trying to save it. And in the Guardians of the Galaxy, and in the process, they manage to rescue a number of people, but they basically fail. And in the process, they think Drax loses his life, Drax the Destroyer. So the rest of the book is them coming to Earth, where Tony Stark has hired some of the Kree in a sort of a pilot work program for immigrants, basically, some of the refugees. But it's not going well. Like there's something wrong. They're not being treated well. The working conditions aren't good. And the Guardians come to Earth seeking the planet killer. Like they're trying to find who killed this entire world, which they feel a measure of guilt for, and also who killed their friend. And it's the plot unfolds from there. And it winds up with them. They immediately come into contact with Tony Stark. A lot of the story involves the Guardians sort of one way or another clashing with the Avengers, with Ms. Marvel in particular caught in the middle. And we can talk about that a little later. But
Yes.
the part of these books to me is the relationship between Ms. Marvel and Tony Stark, which I think is a very rich one, in which I've tried to sort of put through its paces a little bit. But anyway, at the end of this, the Planet Killer is found, but the secret mastermind behind it is still at large. And Shadow Avengers, Carrie's book, which I helped, like I sort of told Aconite where I was leaving it and what I'd like to come back and do in volume 3. And Shadow Avengers is about that entity, that force, trying to invade and conquer the Earth. And then again, without spoiling too much, the new book, Into the Dark Dimension, opens up somewhat later, when things have gone very, very, very wrong.
Yes.
And for the entire multiverse, basically. And various groups of Earth's heroes have to try and free it from this brainwashed slavery that's sort of taken over the entire world.
And you already mentioned you. So let's just start getting a little bit into the dark dimension. I know, because I've read the first 2 chapters, and as much as I can, I don't want to spoil it, but
Okay.
no, but I'm gonna ask, because you already mentioned about the Guardians of the Galaxy. We've already talked, and the Avengers and the Shadow Avengers, of course. In the Shadow Avengers, that cast of characters had Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Venom, Loki. They played key roles, and of course Ms. Marvel played in the key roles. Now, who are your cast of characters into the dark dimension? Because I've seen the cover already.
Yeah.
I see Doc Ock on the cover. Who, without spoiling, who else do you have in there?
Without spoiling it, and with, well, I'm trying to remember all of them because there are a lot. Basically, what happens in the story is that Doctor Strange, who is the leader of the Shadow Avengers, and Tony Stark, Iron Man, both try to free the Earth in their separate, using their separate methods. And in Doctor Strange's case, it takes the Shadow Avengers off Earth for quite a while, seeking Dr. Voodoo, who went missing at the end of Target Cree. But Tony has a big master plan that's crazy and impossible. And it's Ms. Marvel who finds herself really caught between the two of them, because they're both sort of mentors to her a little bit, though she's very self-confident, doesn't really need a mentor. But she also likes them both and wants to help them. But again, the entire the entire population of Earth, with a very, very few exceptions, has been brainwashed at this point, and she doesn't know who to trust. So she's really caught in the middle, and she's the one who has to sort of make the decisions about who to help. Without spoiling too much, Tony tries to recruit various other. Tony finds most of the Avengers not helpful or missing or unavailable. He tries to recruit various other characters, including Cloak and Dagger and Shang-Chi. So that's kind of fun, and it all comes together in a big two-front battle at the end. Part of it on remote Hydra Island, actually, and part of it, as the title indicates, in the Dark Dimension. So that's a very vague outline of it, but a lot of it, I mean, the heart of it again revolves around Ms. Marvel having to try to do the right thing to protect her team, the Shadow Avengers, but at the same time help Tony Stark, who's been a mentor to her and brought her into the Avengers in the first place, and who clearly needs her help, but she doesn't quite know who to trust always.
Now, I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to go back to some of the questions for the book, but because I noticed that on the cover of Target Cree, Ms. Marvel is clearly on the cover. Shadow Avengers, she's in the book, and like you said, you've written her in the first book, Target. So, is there and like you said that Doctor Strange and Tony Stark are kind of like mentors to her. Is there like an overarching story arc for her in all three books, like a growth for her, or?
Well, I can only do so much with Ms. Marvel, obviously.
Oh no, yeah.
But yeah, what it comes down to me is I really think the relationship between her and Tony is one of the richest things Marvel has going now, because he's an older man with a lot of not older man, but he's older than her, and he has a lot of money. He has a lot of family money. She does not. They come from very different backgrounds, very different socioeconomic situations, and she's, to me, a representative of a younger, more multicultural world, who's the people growing up in that world now, like her, are going to have to live in a society that Tony and his father literally built.
That's right.
And there's some natural tension there, I think. And what counterbalances that is that they really genuinely like each other. They have a very strong affection and mutual respect. So on a personal level, basically the way I see it, and this plays out in Target Cree in a different way with the Cree workers, but here it plays out in terms of having to repel the invader from Earth. The only hope the world has is if people like that can work together, can get over whatever stands in their way, whatever barriers are being thrown in their way, which don't come from them. It comes from society or from or history, but or the Dark Dimension in this case. But if they can work together, then the Earth has a chance. That's kind of how I approach the books.
Oh, okay, all right. For the characters that you wrote in your two books, when you wrote these characters, did you kind of combine some of the movie and comic book elements or characteristics in the novels? And basically, when I read the first chapter of Into the Dark Dimension, like Star-Lord, when I'm reading his scenes, I can hear Chris Pratt's voice, and it's great. It's great. It's fun, and also too, I kind of love it when you start talking about the Supreme Intelligence, and you describe the Supreme Intelligence. Oh my God, that is from the comic book. It's not. It's not Annette Bening, So
right. Yeah, on a continuity level, these are the comic book versions, their backgrounds and where they come from and what they've been through. These are strictly the comic book versions. That said, there really isn't a lot of difference sometimes between the two, and the movies in particular, to me, have so beautiful TV shows too. But the Ms. Marvel show wasn't yet on the air when I wrote this. But the movies so beautifully kind of distill down the characters, and and they're so the casting is so great, like on them, that I admit I do rewatch the movies sometimes just to kind of get into voice with the characters, because it just works. That said, there are some characters are very different. Drax's origin is completely different, but his personality isn't that different, and even in the comics, that like the character of Star-Lord has shifted more toward the movie version a bit. So it's not that, it's not again, on a continuity level, these are strictly the comic book versions. But in terms of how I write them and how I hear them in my head, there isn't a sharp line for me. Like I can see, like, Captain America in the comics, for instance, has a somewhat different history than the one in the movies. But really, they're the same person. Like they react very much the same way, and they've been shaped by a lot of the same forces. So yeah, I find that I'm glad to hear that about that prologue. The prologue, I'll tell you a little secret. The prologue features the Guardians of the Galaxy, who are very important. The prologue to Into the Dark Dimension, and they're very important in Target Cree. They play a smaller role in Into the Dark Dimension, and I almost took that prologue out because I was like, am I trying to fit too many characters in? But it just worked on its own to explain the situation so well, and I just love writing those characters. They're just so much fun. So I think it works, but I'm glad I left it in.
Yes, and I can't, like I said, I think I can talk. I'm trying not to spoil too much, because I mean, I know who the big villain is.
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's almost in the title.
Yeah.
it's pretty much there. It is the surprise ending of Target Cree, so I guess we won't say it aloud, but I think it might be on the back cover. I think it probably is. So there you go.
But the thing I love about and Stuart, I'm going to say, I apologize, I do have your first book, Target Cree, literally right next to me. I'm sorry, I haven't read it yet. But like you said,
no apologies necessary. Books have a lot of words. Books have words in them. That's the big problem with books. Like comics you just pick up and read. I have books piled up to them. I have books behind me that I haven't right here that I haven't read. So no, I completely understand that.
No, but the thing. Well, thank you for understanding. But and you saw my email last night of, I'm going to try to finish reading Shadow Avengers. I only got 40 pages left, but I still have a Star Trek book. I'm like, I have barely started anyway. So let me get back. So, but and like you said, that these books, you can pick them up and read it on its own. And like, I picked up Shadow Avengers, and I read, it's great, and I love it because it has a cinematic feel to it. Like, it should, like if I'm watching a movie, because there's really no budget, no boundary, no page limits or panels, or but it's a nice cinematic feel to it. And going back to Into the Dark Dimension, what I love about just the prologue, and I'm glad you kept the prologue in, is because I have never seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen like a huge Marvel event that mixes, the horror genre of Marvel and the cosmic side of Marvel into a huge event. Because usually these big events usually takes place only in New York or some small area, but this one, it's like it feels like it's like a galaxy-wide thing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that, and I hadn't thought of it that way in terms of, but I think, and there might be another example somewhere, but I think you're right in terms of mixing the horror and cosmic elements. The scope of it, most of the book does take place on Earth, except when they go into the Dark Dimension. The Kree galaxy we only see in that prologue. But yeah, there is an idea. The villain has conquered not just the entire galaxy, but the entire multiverse, or most of it. Yes. So there's a definite scope going on here. What we all wanted to do was create something of the level of the Thanos movies, like just something like something that had that kind of involved that many, not just characters, but like that much of the universe, that much of the multiverse, which it turns out is very difficult to do. Like I sat down and I thought, oh, this will be fun, this will be easy. I'm like, oh my God, this is hard. Which is one reason I handed off the second book, because after writing the first one, I kind of needed a rest. And it worked out structurally. It worked out really well because Shadow Avengers is it operates on a slightly smaller scale. It's all set on Earth, or almost all, and it's about the villain trying to invade Earth. Yes. Where Target Cree is, but all the books are mostly set on Earth. Mm-hmm. But Target Cree starts off in the Cree galaxy and involves like several different groups of characters, where the Shadow Avengers is more tightly focused on Doctor Strange's team. Mm-hmm. As you said, that's Spider-Man, the Black Panther, Ms. Marvel, mm-hmm. Luke Cage. There's someone I'm forgetting.
I know there's a bunch, like Valkyrie.
Well, Venom plays an important part too.
Yes. Yeah. And then again, when I read the first chapter, and like you said, Into the Dark Dimension really is very different, and it took me a little while to go, oh my God. I think in the first couple of pages I was going, wait, what's going on? Because I see Kamal Khan at school, and you kind of drop little hints, and then it's literally towards, and of course I don't want to spoil, but towards the end, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked. That was deliberate, and it also plays off of a sequence in Target Cree where she's at school, where we first see her there at I think it's another assembly actually. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of parallel events going on, but the world has actually changed in a dramatic, horrible way, and you only come to realize that as the first few chapters go along.
No, I won't ask. I'm tempted to ask. I'll wait till after the interview to ask you. There's a way, because in that first chapter, there's a way where the villain literally takes over, and I don't want to say anything because I think it's a unique way, because I don't think I've ever seen it before, And it kind of involves like energy drinks and water too.
Oh yeah, that's all set up in the Shadow Avengers too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, yes, it is, but it's great. So okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna move along. I have a process question. So now for Target Cree and Into the Dark Dimension, I know you've written for Marvel Comics. How much research did you do for the characters and the settings, for both books? Because I know at the end of the first book, in your acknowledgement section, you mentioned that you mentioned that Marvel Unlimited, did you have to go back and kind of like go through some of those old issues to kind of like where the certain places or characters and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. But I will say I have read a lot of comic books. It's not quite like researching nuclear fusion, which I've had to do.
Yeah, yes.
But yeah, what I've tended to do in these books is because these novels have a lot of characters, and the characters come in and out of the story sometimes. Like when I get to the sequence with Shang-Chi, I'll sort of cram on him. Like I'll do a whole lot of research, like as if I have a test the next day. Yeah. I'll sort of read a bunch of key Shang-Chi stories. There's a sequence in Into the Dark Dimension that involves him being confronted with a vision of his father, mm-hmm. and I wanted that's a case where the continuity is very different in the comics from the movie. So that was a case where I did go back and just read, and that Marvel app unlimited app is a godsend for this sort of thing, because you can just call these things up like instantly. And again, once I can't remember. I think I saw the Shang-Chi movie after I did the first draft of this. But again, when I got to the Guardians, I would just pull that one up on Disney Plus and just watch a bit of it, enough to get in the voice of the characters. So yeah, there's specific research I do for for plot points,
Mhm.
if it refers back to something. I don't like to get too heavy with old continuity, because
Oh yeah.
there's already a lot going on in these books, and I don't
Yes.
want people to think they have to research. But there are little things you can work in, like the use of the World Breaker Hulk in Target Cree.
Mhm.
That was so yeah. I kind of I do enough to make the story make sense at the beginning, and then as I'm going along, I'll sort of immerse myself in the history of whatever characters I'm writing at the time.
And the other thing I have to say, with and and again, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep referring back to this because the only one book that I've read so far is Shadow Avengers. Is that what's nice about these, and even just the couple chapters of Into the Dark Dimension, is that um you don't have to keep going into like the origins, like the prologue. This is the Guardians of the Galaxy, and you
Right.
don't have to go through like a whole page of this is who they were, and it's just this is the Guardians of the Galaxy. Star Lord, is oh my God, Drax, hold the door. We just jump right in because we kind of know who they are already. You know.
Yeah, and that's a big change from when I started doing these novels, frankly, because the movies are such a universal part of our culture now. Like when I wrote I think it was 2011, I wrote the Civil War
Mhm.
novelization, and this was long before. I mean, I think the first few Marvel movies were out, but there weren't any. It was before the first Avengers movie. It was before.
Yes.
It was certainly before Civil War, the movie. And at that time, I really worried about whether I was putting too many characters into it that the casual reader would not be familiar with.
Yes.
And now I really don't worry about that as much. I think people are used to, especially how many people have seen those Thanos movies and how many characters are in them. Like
Yes.
I think people are they're not only familiar with even a lot of minor Marvel characters. It's also gotten easier to just look things up on the internet if you
That's true.
don't
Oh
know who
yeah.
they are. But I think people are also used to the idea of lots of characters just popping up, like, and
Mhm.
that's part of the fun. So yeah, I don't worry about that as much, and I don't stop the story to explain who they are quite
Mhm.
as much as I did maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then still on the research questions, I'm just asking, like, if something like when you're trying to read key storylines in Marvel Unlimited, um did you ever get a chance to go, "Hey, I need to work something out," or is this correct? Did you ever like talk to some of your friends or former coworkers from Marvel about, does this make sense, the continuity? And also too, was it also fun talking to them, reminiscing about some old comic book stories, or even working with them?
Yeah, that's always fun. In the case of this, I pretty much know the continuity, and I go to the published work
Yes.
as
Okay.
the authority. That said, everything goes through Marvel,
Oh,
and
that's right.
they approve the outline and they approve the manuscript, and they will course correct me if they think something isn't quite right. The I had very few changes on Into the Dark Dimension, probably because we'd been through this
Mhm.
already. There were a few things in Target Cree. I was playing a little too fast and loose in the first draft with Ms. Marvel's secret identity, which
Mhm.
they like to keep very, very secret. Very few people are allowed to know it. So we had to do a few tweaks to make that work, which all worked fine. It was all doable. They're very reasonable. One thing I've always liked about Marvel, and in the various capacities I've worked with them, is compared to some companies, they just don't make trouble.
Oh
They
yeah.
want work. They just really want something to work
Mhm.
always. And it's always been kind of a lean, fast-moving company in a way, even now that it's owned by Disney. And uh, and I appreciate that about them. They're good to work with.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, that's really good. That's really good to hear. Um, one more question before I start moving on about the um actually no, I'm going to jump on to the next question. Sorry. So
Mhm.
into the now, if I remember correctly, I think this character was introduced in your first book, and now because he's made an appearance in the prologue of Into the Dark Dimension. So may I ask, and for me, who is um Hala R? And
Yeah. He
yes,
he's a teenage Kree. He's a refugee from the planet that's destroyed at the beginning of Target Kree. and he's pretty important in that book. He comes to Earth. He winds up going to school with Ms. Marvel. He befriends her. He is not as important in Into the Dark Dimension, but I wanted to revisit him briefly because at the end of Target Kree, he winds up going off into space with the Guardians. So he's there, and it made sense that if they were trying to infiltrate the Kree homeworld, Hala, they would use him because he is a Kree. So he's sort of there and pretending to sign up to become an accuser or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was a case where I had this character. I'd left a little loose end. He's like several characters. I wound up using him fairly sparingly in Into the Dark Dimension because we just had so much going on. But he's friends with Ms. Marvel, and he's just been working with the Guardians. Yeah, and he's a I like the reason his name is strange is he was actually, like, he's from a poor planet on the outskirts of the Kree Empire, but he was named after Hala, which is the home world, where they visit there, because his family always hoped he would go there and become a warrior. So that's sort of his backstory.
Ah, okay. And I'm gonna this is an off the cuff question. Is he part of the Marvel comics, or is this a new character that you created for the book?
He's a new character. Yeah, he was invented as part of this planet that gets destroyed in Target Kree.
Oh, okay,
his sister is also an important part of Target Kree, but I couldn't fit her into the new book at all. Okay. I think she's mentioned once.
Do you want to give out shout outs to to anyone that helped you on the book, and anybody from from family to the editors? You want to give shout outs who helped you on this book?
No, I did it all myself. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I have my wife Liz Sonneborn, who's also a writer, is always helpful, and she's always great to bounce things off of. She's wonderful. I have two cats who are, as I speak, asleep on the opposite ends of the couch in my office. They're getting older and they don't move as much as they used to, but they're a great comfort. Yeah, my family's great. My brother and my mother, we all talk every Monday night, and they look a little befuddled and not quite understanding when I started talking to them about the Kree Empire and the Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're they've all been good. The people at Marvel have been great. Aconite is a very nice operation to work with. My editor there, a woman named Gwen, is very helpful and responsive. She really made the transition work with Carrie coming in to write the middle book. That was her call, and she sort of had us not directly in touch. We are in touch now, but she had us exchanging notes and things like that, and that all worked out really well.
I know in your first book you gave a few shout outs to a few Brooklyn breweries. I'm being serious because do you want to give out shout outs to them today? Did they kind of sort of help you with this book too?
Sadly, a couple of them aren't with us anymore.
Oh, sorry.
In fact, the one closest to my home closed up just about a year ago. But yeah, there's Other Half Brewing is great. Threes is great. Strong Rope, Wild East, and Finback. Those are the five I'd say. There were two that were even closer to my house, and both of them kind of did not survive the pandemic and the immediate post pandemic economic climate. But yeah, there's still a lot of that going around. It's a really good place for breweries.
Okay. This is a fun question. Would you be open to adapt, this, either Target Kree, or your book Into the Dark Dimension for Marvel Comics as a standalone event? Would you be open to like writing a comic book, like a 12-part or comic book event?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if they ever wanted, yeah, that'd be great. It's I don't think it's too likely because it involves a lot of big characters who are tied up in other people's books, where when I write the novels, I can pretty much, as long as I don't cut off Tony Stark's leg or something. Although I come pretty close to doing a few things like that here and there. But like I can pretty much take them and I can, in this case, like really mess up the entire multiverse.
Yes.
As long as sort of put it back close to the way it was near the end. That's harder to do in the larger Marvel, in the time Marvel universe. But yeah, I would love to do stuff like that, and I'd really love to do more with, again, that relationship between Ms. Marvel and Iron Man, which I think is very rich. I think there's a lot of potential there.
That's perfect, because it ties into my next question. Like I said, will you be writing more? You know, do you know if there's going to be any more Crisis Protocol novels in the future, or is this?
I don't. I haven't had that discussion. Every time I finish one of these, I'm so tired that I wait for them to ask me. So I actually don't know what the future is of that line. That's a good. Thank you, Jason. I should actually ask them that. No, I'd be happy to do more. They're like I said, they're very tricky to write. They take me longer than most other books, but they're very satisfying and fun, and I just love playing with all those characters.
Because, and I'm going to
again, I was just going to say, as long as one thing I always try to do with these books is I try and make sure there's some in and among all the crazy, fantastic like battles and large scale scope. I try and make sure there's something important to me being said in these books. And the first one really was about immigrants, workers' rights in a way. And when you have these Kree come to Earth, and there's some force that's that Tony Stark is not aware of. That's it's like a bad apple inside Stark Enterprises that's not treating them very well. And in this one, it has more to do with the fact that Tony recruits into the Dark Dimension. Tony winds up recruiting a bunch of wealthy tech people to help him, including Dr. Octopus, when he can't get the Avengers. And as usual, to my mind, when you recruit a whole bunch of wealthy tech people, it doesn't go very well at all. So that was a little not just an in-joke, but a little bit of social commentary on my part that I thought was important. Anyway, I hope people like it.
No, but I think the thing, but it's kind of like, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a little bit off the cuff, but it's in some sense like, you've written some Star Trek stories. It's because that's what Gene Roddenberry did with Star Trek. Instead of just going, I want to talk about the Vietnam War, this is my story. No, he packages it up nicely in the future with characters on a ship that they go to a planet, and then they observe,
it's very much the same idea, and Marvel's always done that too. Certainly, Civil War was about that. Civil War was very much about the sort of the original. I'm talking about the original comic. It was very much about the late George W. Bush era, and we're building a security state post 9/11, and what kind of freedoms are you willing to give up in order to be safe? And that's so Marvel's got a history of that as well. But yeah, it's very much in the Star Trek mold. I agree.
I think let me move on to what was the most cool thing or things that you love working on these two books?
Wow. It does always come down to the characters for me. I think the most fun scenes to write for me are always the Guardians of the Galaxy, because I just love the voices of those characters. I was thinking about Drax this morning, and Drax plays well, he's actually off. He's presumed dead for a big chunk of Target Kree, but when he comes back in a big way. And one thing I like about Drax is that, to me, even more like the Guardians are all like this, but he's the real working man. He's like the guy with the strong arms who, he's got his own version of reality, and he always says inappropriate things, and and he laughs at wrong times and everything. But if you're if you were in a disaster and your house was knocked down, he'd just rebuild it. He just get in there, he just roll up his sleeves, he just do it. I really kind of like that about him. I see him as almost like a weird postmodern neuroatypical Paul Bunyan or something, like somebody from like a mythical figure who would just come in and fix things. So but anyway, that's a little off the topic.
No.
But writing the Guardians is always fun. It's always funny. I love the kind of extended gags you can get going with them, both visual. I can't do quite the same kind of visual gags as the comics or the movies, but you can do some. And verbal mostly. But again, the heart of the story to me is Ms. Marvel and Tony, and in this book it's Ms. Marvel and Tony opposite Doctor Strange. And Tony and Doctor Strange are a lot of fun too, because they're both authority figures. They're both kind of used to being in charge.
Yes.
And they approach the world very, very differently. So those are fun scenes too.
Oh, okay. All right. Now I'm going to move on from Into the Dark Dimension to outer space. I think Stuart, you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
The Ahoy Comics Highball. Please feel free to talk about this latest Ahoy series. I know it's going to come out in trade at the on March 29th. So yeah, please feel free to talk about that.
Well, Highball is it's a science fiction comedy that I created last year with artist Fred Harper, who I've worked with before. And the premise of it is Highball. Highball is he's the star pilot in the Earth Corp, and but he has a big problem, which is that he can only hit the target when he's dead drunk, which is why his call sign is Highball. Where so that creates some problems, and not to spoil anything too much, but Earth is in the series, Earth is kind of it's been very, very passively conquered by an obnoxious alien race called the Mentok, who just kind of like they just kind of stepped in and said, we should really run your economy and your military, and we were just sort of intimidated and lazy, and we just sort of said okay. So, and there was a war, there was all the background, but basically Highball, without intending to, has become a sort of a pawn of these puffed up idiots who run Earth. And what sort of comes out over the course of the story, I hope, is that he drinks not just to focus his concentration so he can actually fire a particle beam and hit his target, but also so that he doesn't have to think too much about the implications of what he's doing. And that's a problem. That actually is kind of a not very sustainable situation. So a lot of it's just like vaguely dirty jokes and people behaving very badly, and dumb jokes about cryptocurrency. But it has a serious side to it too, I think, and I hope people like that. I hope people get it. I'm very proud of it. It came out in 5 issues last year. The collected edition will be out March 29th with a whole lot of extra features in the back, including my annotations for the whole thing and an awful lot of Fred's sketches and early design work as well.
Yes, and listeners, because I remember when I interviewed Stuart and Fred last year, I read the first issue. Fred's art is great in that issue. Yes, I mean, I've seen his work in Snelson, another Ahoy comic, Snelson, and also you and Fred worked on Wrong Earth Purple.
That's right. Yeah, which was a sort of a 1980s tribute, and Fred went kind of all out on that. He's been around a while. He's a very talented comics artist. He's done work at DC, but he's also a very talented illustrator. Does a lot of work for he was doing a lot of work up until I think the magazine cut back, but for a magazine called The Week in New York. So yeah, he's multi-talented. He's great. He's local, so we get together and talk at some of those breweries you were mentioning, actually, and that's always nice too. But he's a sweet, sweet guy and a great collaborator, and I'm lucky to have him to work with.
All right, Stuart, I'm slowly wrapping things up. There's a fun question. I know you posted this picture on your Twitter feed. Who is your good friend? Reynardo the Fox. Yeah, oh my God. I'm sorry, this is only audio, but listeners, he has Ronaldo.
I brought him.
Yes.
he lives in my office, so he didn't have a long commute. Renardo is actually from a play I was in high school quite a while ago, and it was a musical called Carnival, which is it's an old line musical. It's actually the sexual politics of it probably wouldn't fly very well today, but it's about a young woman who joins a carnival, falls for a puppet master who can't manage to express his feelings to her very well except through the puppets. And I was the puppet master's assistant, who has his own solo called the Chef de Paris. But I did the voices of some of these puppets, and they let me keep this guy. Is Renardo the Fox. He is badly in need of a carpeting shampoo at this point. He's probably decades overdue for that, and his pipe cleaner whiskers are a little dirty too. But he's my friend. He lives in the corner of the office, and I put him up. Yeah, I put him up on Twitter because an old high school friend wished me a happy birthday, and I wanted to sort of blow her mind and show her that I still had this fun little guy around. But yeah, he's my friend. He's my old friend.
I have to see, but that's pretty cool that the high school let you keep that, keep the puppet. That's so cool, though.
Yeah, they let me. They didn't have anything else to do with him, but I did the voice. I did the voice of him, which was one of these very exaggerated French accents. Yeah, they let me keep him, so that was fun. I also did a walrus named Horrible Henry, who talked kind of like this. He was a little like that. But somebody else got Henry. I think the other puppeteer got Henry.
Oh, Stuart, thank you very much for sharing that. Just a couple more questions. And I'm looking more towards in April and May. Do you have any book signing or comic book convention appearances?
Still putting that together. It looks like I'll be at Ithacon in Ithaca, New York, in April 22nd, I think it is, with the staff of Ahoy, who are based up near there. I'm gonna go up with them. That's the only one I'm absolutely sure about right now. I've been laying a little low on cons since the pandemic started, but fingers crossed, things look a lot better now. I'm always at New York Comic Con or around there because that's my local, and I'll probably be well, that's too soon. I'll probably be at Big Apple Con. I think we're going to do a panel there, but that's March 23rd, I think, something like that. But yeah, other than that, I'm still figuring it out. I probably won't make it to San Diego this year, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any closing words to our listeners?
There's only one thing I forgot to mention. I've also been doing some short comic stories with a company called Interpop, which posts their comics free on the website and sells enhanced NFT versions of them. And they have a really fun superhero universe called The Emergence. And I've written a few short pieces. I've got another one coming up with a character called the Mad Confectionist, who's a villain who animates candy and toys and not toys, but candy and cakes and things like that. So that's fun. Those guys are fun to work with. I've done a few things with them already. Yeah. Other than that, I'm just happy to be doing all this, and I really appreciate you bringing me on again here to talk about my little 8 zillion character Marvel novels that I'm still recovering from.
Stuart, just mahalo for your time. Thank you for coming back on the show. Thank you very much.
Mahalo.
Thank you. And I wish you all the success into the Dark Dimension. And also too a success, and I wish you all the continuing success for the highball trade paperback that's going to come out later this month in March. Again, I want to give Ashley and Joe a shout out for sending me an advanced reading copy of the first 2 chapters of Into the Dark Dimension. Stuart, I'm going to be honest, I cannot wait for this book to come out. And if you are a lifelong comic book reader or a new comic book reader, please check out Into the Dark Dimension, a Marvel Crisis Protocol novel from Aconite Books. It comes out on April 18th in the US and on June 22nd in the UK. And Stuart, please give me just a minute, because I want to give you know, to also give a shout out for, listeners to also even check out, Target Cree, your other book, Target Cree, that's in this series,
Yeah.
and also Carrie Harris's Shadow Avengers too. And I know Carrie also wrote another book from Aconite, that's part of the it's part of the like X-Men related story, Liberty and Justice, that she wrote. And I also want to give a
That's right.
shout out for to Elisa Quickney. She also wrote Rogue Untouched for Aconite Books as well. So listeners, please check that. If you get a chance, please check those out. Now I'm currently still trying to finish up Shadow Avengers. What I really love, for me, I still love reading comics. I really do. And to me, I love reading the Shadow Avengers because, again, as I told Stuart, it has that nice cinematic feel to it. And the other thing too is that it's these are self-contained stories. The other thing too, I love, and like Stuart says, that he can play around with, he can mix characters around. Like in Shadow Avengers, I don't I don't see Loki, because there's a fight scene between Spider-Man and Loki. I probably will never see that in the comics unless there's some major crossover event. And it's just and it just, it's really great. And the other thing too is that, as I mentioned too, and I talked to Stuart, is that when they introduce the characters, it's either they give a one line, like background information, one sentence, but they don't go into depth in, this is Venom, this is how he got his powers. It's just, this is Venom, Eddie Brock, hey, I'm still pissed at Peter Parker for getting me fired, and they just go from there. Also too, so if you guys get a chance, please check out these Crisis Protocol novels. Also, too, listeners, if you guys get a chance, please check out the Highball trade from Ahoy Comics that comes out on March 29th. I want to thank Drew, the host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
Aloha.
As you know, our LCS is Cowabunga Comics, Lake Country, Wisconsin's best pop culture destination for new comics, back issues, gaming, retro video games, vinyl, and figures. Give them a call, 262-569-9999. Check them out online at cowabungacomics.com, or follow them on Twitter at Incredicow. They are our LCS, and we utilize their deep discount mail order service to bring Oconomowoc, Wisconsin closer to us. They'll take care of you. Tell them Drew and Kyle sent you. Say hi to Eric and James from us. If you need an LCS, you can't go wrong with Cowabunga Comics.
In a world ravaged by war and chaos, a group of survivors must band together to brave the dangers of a post-apocalyptic landscape. The year is 2000, and the world has been plunged into darkness. The nuclear fires have burned out, leaving behind a wasteland of ruins and radiation. But amidst the rubble and despair, a glimmer of hope still remains. Join Dorkday Afternoon as they face off against marauding gangs, enemy soldiers, and even the harsh elements themselves in the world of Twilight 2000. Will our heroes survive the challenges ahead? Can they keep their own humanity intact? Or will they succumb to the harsh realities of life after the end of the world? 2 past midnight. An actual play podcast by Dorkday Afternoon.